Welcome to Pitch It To Me Podcast, a show about the subjective past, present, and potential future of flesh and blood design. On today's special episode, we'll be announcing the winners of the 2024 Custom Card Design Contest. This episode is brought to you by our sponsors, Metal Fab Tokens and Fabric.gg. Each host today will give the first and second place winners for our three categories. Firstly, Red Pitch will be Fuzzy starting us off with the Hero Specialization category. On Yellow Pitch, Clark will give the winners for the Talent Card category. On Blue Pitch, Joel will present the winners for the Legendary Equipment category. You can find us across all socials such as TikTok and Instagram at Pitch It To Me Podcast.
I'm Clark.
I'm Joel.
And I'm Fuzzy.
And we're Pitch It To Me Podcast.
We're so excited to announce the winners of our custom card design contest today. Thank you to everyone who submitted a design. And honestly, every design that we saw was an all-star that we'd be happy to see in the game.
Yeah, we had 55 people give us submissions, 55 designers, and we had 116 designs to pick through. So we thought this was going to be like one afternoon. We'll order some pizza. We'll knock it out of the park. This took us like 2 full meeting days.
Yeah, there was a lot of cool ideas, and narrowing them down to 2 for each category was way harder than we initially expected it.
And I thought it would be hard, but it was even harder than that.
Yeah. It really was. We want to take a brief moment here to talk a little bit about the structure of our podcast. If this is the first time that you're chiming in, our podcast follows this format. We have our introduction that you just heard. And right now we're in turn 0. This is our little business talk before we get into it. Then we have Red Pitch, Yellow Pitch, and Blue Pitch. Headed by one of our hosts, they go over the topic. For this case, it is one of the categories for our contest. Afterwards, there will be an Arsenal zone, where normally we talk about a card that we appreciate, but this time we'll talk about some fun stats that we were able to find and discover while digging through everyone's submissions.
After the episode, if you didn't win the contest, but you still submitted a design, we would encourage you to go to our Discord and start a discussion thread for your card. You can always email us and we can send your design back to you in case you didn't save a copy. But we're not going to be posting your design anywhere, but we would encourage you to do so. And I know lots of people in our Discord were really excited to see all the designs that didn't make it. So we would just love to see a lot of discussion over there, and we'll even give you some more of our thoughts on your design if you want to hear from us still.
Yeah, there's a lot of thoughts that we had that we couldn't fit into one episode. So chances are, we have plenty of stuff to say about your awesome designs.
And you can find the link for that Discord in the description below.
For this episode, we'll be primarily focusing on what we liked about the winning designs rather than what any one design could have done quote unquote better. So just keep that in mind.
We're not here to criticize, we're here to build up the community.
True.
Before we remind you about the rules of the contest, we want to talk a little bit about our sponsors.
Metal Fab Tokens and Fabric.gg. Metal Fab Tokens is your one-stop shop for flesh and blood accessories. They make little metal tokens at an affordable price, helping you keep track of the little interactions on your combat chain.
And you'll be the envy of all the other players at your local armory.
So true.
Yeah.
Also, we are sponsored by Fabric.gg, which is an amazing resource for all of your deck building concerns, your card searches.
They also have helpful articles written by community members.
Mm-hmm. They pull voices from all over the community and talk about a variety of different formats. It's not just all CC at Fabric.gg. They spend plenty of time talking about Blitz, Commoner, budget builds. If you or someone that you know is looking to get into the game, explore a new class or a new hero, hell, maybe these designs really make you think about a different class or hero in an exciting way, and you want to explore what building them looks like and maybe how to do it on a budget, Fabric.gg is the perfect place to go.
Well said. All right, so let's go over the rules of the contest as a reminder. We have 3 different categories. The submissions didn't have to require any art, but we did have a couple notable submissions that chose to supply art for their cards anyway, which we thought was really cool. The first prize for each category is a box of heavy hitters, a $40 shopping spree at Metal Fab Tokens, and you'll get one of our shirts. Second place also gets one of our shirts. We're repping that brand.
Yep. We also wanted to show some extra appreciation for our runner-ups, so we will also be shipping out with our shirts 3 packs from a set that has some affiliation to the card that they designed.
Mm-hmm. Now, if you're one of our winners, We plan on contacting you using the information you provided when you submitted your entry. We'll contact you about 24 hours after the release of this episode to give a chance for people to tune in and hear from us who the winners are. But if you listen to the episode, feel free to reach out to us first so we can get that ball rolling. If you're living in the US, you won't have to worry about shipping. We'll make sure that all of that is taken care of for you.
And for transparency, we judged each submission on these 4 categories being readability, flavor, innovation, and realism.
One last note. We appreciate each and every single person who submitted. Whether you put in 10 days, 10 hours, or 10 minutes into your submission, it means the world to us that y'all engaged with our contest.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you.
And if you're only just now hearing about this contest, don't worry. We had so much fun doing this. We'll probably do something like it again in the future.
Now, with all of that legalese out of the way, I think we're going to get started with our hero specializations by Fuzzy. What do you got for us?
So I had 46 total submissions to this category. So it was the largest category, which is why we're starting with it first. So naturally, this one was so hard to judge. So many different submissions. And you guys saw a lot of them too, right? Like,
we read just about every submission on our own, but we only really met to have conversation over a list.
Yeah,
Not
yeah.
even a short list. I think we talked about nearly half of the cards.
Each judge was responsible for narrowing down each category before the 3 judges communicated on each submission specifically. But there were a lot of good cards in this list. I want to start with our runner-up. Maybe we'll add a drum roll in editing. It's Tribute for the Vast Beyond by Zachary Wallach.
Woohoo! Let's go!
This card is a Vinset specialization. It is a Shadow Runeblade action, Aura. It is a red pitch card that costs 2 resources and blocks for 2. When it enters the arena, it has 3 blood counters on it. At the beginning of your action phase, remove a blood counter from this, otherwise destroy this. Each time you lose life during your turn, create a rune chant token. Zachary provided this description. Vinset always feels so close to being more playable, if not outright viable, but lacks that extra rune chant generation the deck needs to keep up with slower decks. LSS wouldn't print Runeblood Incantation 2, but making another rune chant generation aura with added flavor encourages use of Vinset's hero power and flail weapon. Additionally, a Vinset player that decides to leave Blood Debt in their Banish Zone at the end of their turn lets them make a bunch of rune chants off of taking each ping of Blood Debt damage before unleashing all of that self-inflicted damage into powerful payoff turns, all of which feels very thematically appropriate to me.
Wow, Zach. What a card.
This is what we would consider in the Pitum arena a certified banger. I want to say, I love the power spike that it adds to Vinset in exchange for life, as well as encouraging the use of more niche cards to really capitalize on this effect. I think Clark and I were talking about, is it Deathly Delight, the one that nets you a life if you if each hero takes damage or whatever.
Mm-hmm. So often cards that excited me were cards that made me feel like I wanted to change how I was building the hero to utilize this new tool. So Carrion Husk, the offhand Grimoire, the Deathly Delight. These are all cards that aren't currently being run, but with this card included into the list, they become a lot more viable, a lot more interesting, and therefore it opens up brand new opportunities and ways of playing Vinset.
I like the idea of stocking your Banish Zone with these Blood Debt cards, potentially even equipments that never leave, in order to get a lot of value out of this aura. And you're still taking damage in order to make these rune chants, right? And those Blood Debt cards that are dealing damage to you, Vinset doesn't really have a way of getting rid of them. So you could be banking these rune chants during these power turns and then still feeling the cost of these Blood Debt cards throughout the game. And that seems like some pretty interesting gameplay to me.
Yeah, it just seemed like a really good understanding of Vinset fundamentally and what she struggles with, and this gives her a unique power card, but not without the cost of the most valuable resource being life points.
It really opens her up.
Yeah, not to mention the flavor involved with the self-inflicted damage fueling her power. It's right in line with her lore, with all of her aesthetic. It synergizes great with her specialization weapon, with her hero ability. It is just a concert of flavor.
Yep. So if your name is Zach Wallach, great job on designing this card. Really cool concept.
And he's one of our locals too. It's pretty much every armory we go to, Zach is there, and we're all hoping we don't get paired against him. He's a monster. So Zach, we owe you a t-shirt. And our winner for the Hero Specialization category is Timber Crash by Valerio Guercio.
Yay!
Let's go! I know that guy.
Timber Crash is a Guardian weapon log, a Betsy specialization with 4 attack, and it has once per turn action, costs 3 resources, attack. Activate only if an aura you controlled has been destroyed this turn. When this attacks a hero, you may wager your choice of a Might or Vigor token with them. Then, if you've wagered 3 or more times this turn, this gets +2 attack until end of turn. Valerio gave the following comments. I designed this weapon with the goal of giving Betsy a weapon that plays into the wager mechanic, but can also allow her to further get value from the tokens she gets from winning wagers. I recognize that consistent wagers on a weapon could be too strong, so I added the attack drawback to ensure you can't just spend 2 blues to guarantee 5 overpower with a wager every turn in the endgame. Finally, I added the +2 attack clause for payoff on a big wager turn. I also think the buff works well thematically to represent swinging with everything you've got when the stakes are highest.
What a fucking card, man.
What an absolute beast of a card, just like Betsy. This is a card I can imagine dominating in the arena.
I love this idea of stacking up multiple wagers, and Betsy can do that relatively reasonably right now, right? If she plays one of these big bet big or big bop auras on her last turn.
No, it's bigger than big and big bop.
What did I say?
You said
said
bet
bet
big, which is, to be fair, they all sound very, very similar.
So you play one of those on your last turn, this card supplies one of its own wagers, and Good Time Chapeau can give you a third. Effects like Good Time Chapeau would count as 1 wager even though they supply 2 tokens, so you would still have to find 2 other sources of wager, one of which could easily be like this weapon itself. So finding the third would probably not be too hard, but it is something you have to look for.
Yeah, their decks are already running money where your mouth is. Outside of that, it would need to be those big, aggressive 3-costed auras.
What I also like about this card for Betsy is it has potential to be stronger than Anothos, but it requires a lot more work. And I think for the most part, Betsy's hero ability doesn't have the same complexity as Bravo's does, or like the same necessity for a lot of the time, because Overpower just isn't that strong. But when you combine all of these effects and make it so that you're really working for these larger wager effects, and you still have things like Tear Asunder and Buckle, like it adds a really unique identity of being like a weapon-centric Guardian, whereas I think Anothos is like a good way of filtering card for Bravo. And so offering this new like playstyle essentially for Betsy to focus more on the weapon, it's kind of unique in a way, even though it like all Guardians love
a good old 3 for 6.
Exactly. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And I like how the drawback of only being able to attack with it if you have an aura destroyed that turn does a good job of like gatekeeping that power between a little bit of a hoop that you have to jump through, even if that hoop is not really hard. It doesn't say non-token aura, so seismic surges should be able to count for this effect. And tectonic plating is something we already see Guardians playing a lot. So if you're making seismic surges every turn in order to make sure that you can have the option of attacking with this weapon, I think that one extra resource that you're probably not going to be using, since this is not an attack action card, is both like balanced and reasonable.
Or even on top of that, the Might or Vigor token that you're able to create by getting the previous attack to land.
Very true. Yep.
Like I just imagine Betsy just like having like this fucking whirlwind of swings with this log, and she's just like swinging around, like continuously hitting. That's how this card feels, because every time you win a wager, those things pop, so you can continue swinging with the weapon. So it's really this unique blend of Guardian and using this big log in a like just big hunkin' weapon way.
Not to mention, when I first read this card, I immediately saw the word aura, and I wasn't even thinking about the tokens. I was thinking about Stonewall Confidence. There are so many defensive auras that I regularly see players trying to find the opportunity to work into their builds and never really seeing it because Guardian is so math oriented and so turn by turn oriented in their value that seeing a hero that is more designed with this setup payoff could be really, really interesting to see if these defensive auras can come into play.
I like how this gives us an image, a potential vision of the future, because everybody wants to know what Betsy's log is going to do. Everybody's expecting it, right? And I would be pretty happy if this is something that LSS printed.
Yeah, likewise. I think a lot of people would really enjoy this design. So congrats again, Valerio. Really well done.
So that's our runner-up and our first place prize. We'll be contacting you again about 24 hours after this episode comes out. I do want to give a couple of honorable mentions, people who didn't quite have the top prize, but I want to talk about on the pod. First, I want to mention Josh B., Dane Celestia, and also Peter Gary. You three all gave Kasai specialization designs, and they all had kind of similar ideas. Each one had a little bit of a unique twist, but basically all of them had an option that allowed you to create 3 coppers in place of a gold token. Peter, your design was a reward when you hit, as an attack reaction, and the other 2 allowed you to exchange your gold for copper. And Dane's card actually also let you go in reverse, destroy copper to make gold. And the fact that they were all really similar, I thought was really cute, and I wanted to talk about on the pod.
And all for the same hero, too, which was very funny to see. Those were the 3 Kasai specialization entrants, and they all had a very all playing on the same design space.
I think people were hungry to be able to play blood on her hands, even if this new Kasai, even though she doesn't make copper naturally.
Yeah, I feel all 3 of your collective pain in not being able to consistently play blood on her hands after playing it for 2 years straight and then not being able to consistently do it. Yeah, I appreciate the effort as well.
Additionally, I want to shout out Abigail Weldy. Her design was especially unique. It was called Enter the Dream. It cost 6. It was a blue Mystic Assassin instant that you could only play if you've already played a blue card this turn. It allowed you to look at target hero's hand and discard 2 of those cards. But instead, if Chi was pitched to play it, you could gain control of that hero until the end of their next turn. And that's a crazy effect that we haven't seen in Flesh and Blood before, being able to take control of an opponent's hero. And we thought it was crazy enough that it deserved a special shout out.
Yeah. Now, this card does require 4 cards to pull off. Even with Transcend shenanigans, there's really no way to make this a 3-card hand, which is nice. And I think all 4 cards need to be blue to make that happen, too. So, there's a really cool pitch stack opportunity here. We had a lot of fun talking about this card, and especially realizing that New could endlessly loop this in the mirror match by being able to play a blue from the opponent's banish zone.
Yeah, because it banishes itself when it's played. So if you're playing it from your opponent who is also New, then it would loop. Yeah, which was just a little silly.
Well, yeah, we really enjoyed reading this card, and I think your homage to Mindslaver from Magic the Gathering was something that we all appreciated since we all came from Magic the Gathering. And more bold effects like this, just being able to manipulate how the game is played was very interesting, and I really like the inclusion of in this episode.
So with that, I'm going to hand it off to Clark. Tell us about who won the talent cards category.
So the talent cards category was a very fun category for me to judge. I really wanted to take on a category that didn't have a lot of legendary cards, a lot of top end one-ofs. I wanted to see a lot more rainbow oriented cards, things that I can almost imagine someone's putting 9 of in a deck. And I definitely think that we got a lot of those designs. I really appreciate a lot of the designs. When we first were talking about this category, we were saying that it might not have as many submissions as the other 2, but it actually broke even with legendary equipment. So I'm really, really happy about everyone who submitted to this category.
How many designs did we see, Clark?
We had 33 submissions.
Golly.
To start us off, let's go into our runner-up. The runner-up for the talent category is Amulet of Miasma by Floor Emoji.
Let's go!
Amulet of Miasma is a shadow action item. It costs 0, is color locked at blue, and has Go Again. It has null attack and null block. As an instant, you may banish Amulet of Miasma to banish the top 2 cards of each hero's deck. It has Blood Debt. Floor Emoji gave us the following description. This is a simple item designed to be used by shadow heroes without strong abilities to banish cards like Chain, especially as a setup card for a strong burst later in the game. The item has Blood Debt and self-banishes as a drawback, but because I think the Blood Debt design space is currently a bit underutilized, the Shadow Talent has many options you could use to interact with Blood Debt in more nuanced ways in the future. And man, do I agree, Floor Emoji.
I love this item.
This item really exemplifies that idea of simple and elegant.
This item to me like screams versatility. The ability to expose both players to the will and power of like demons is a huge flavor win for me. And I think that translates very well to like the card version.
Yes. This also is very interesting. Not unlike many other shadow cards, it has a slight disruption effect to it, being able to banish the top of both heroes' decks. So if someone has maybe opted into a pitch stack and you do a good job of tracking it, you can throw off their pitch stack by banishing the top of their deck.
Like they play Ravenous Rabble against you and they reveal a power card. You're like, ooh, I think I'm going to crack my amulet here to get rid of that. And it requires that little bit of setup. Like you're still giving one of your cards in order to affect the board state in like a non-tempo way for the most part.
And we made sure that when we were reading this card, we thought about it in all of the current Shadow Hero design spaces. For Levia, this very much acts as an emergency way of turning off Blood Debt. In Vincent, this is a way of obtaining more power, and in Chain, maybe a way of starting those really big, extra big hand turns just a little bit sooner at the risk of putting a non-playable from Blood Debt card into your Blood Debt. So there's a lot going on with this card that makes it an interesting design choice. Every single hero needs to think about, what is this doing for me? Should I include it? And how do I best utilize it? And for all of those reasons, we believe that this was a strong contender to win and deserves our runner-up position.
Yeah, well said, Clark, and well designed. Thank you so much, Floor Emoji, for your design.
One thing I really like about this card is the ways that it can open itself up to skill expression from the player. There's so many things you can do with it. You can banish the top 2 cards of your deck because you want to get cards in Blood Debt or to fix your draws, or you can banish the top 2 cards of your opponent's deck in a variety of situations. There's a lot of potential, especially if you're tracking the pitch stack, which is already a very skill expressive thing to do in the first place.
Right, and I think as a finishing comment, I think all of us really appreciated how elegant and condensed the design was. Like it's literally 1 sentence long, but the implications of this design was like a lot to consider. It was very cool to talk about.
Now on to first place. Taking the top prize for our talent category, we have Tectonic Romp.
Let's go!
By Michel Remillard. Tectonic Romp is an elemental brute attack action. It costs 2, and at red has 8 power and 2 block. It has the ability Earth Wild Fusion. It reads, as an additional cost to play this, you may reveal a random card from your hand. If an Earth card is revealed this way, Tectonic Romp is fused. As an additional cost to play this, discard a random card. If Tectonic Romp was fused, you may bury that card instead, with the reminder text, to bury a card, place it face up under any card in your arsenal. Michel provided the following description. This card presents 2 new mechanics that come together to create the concept for an Earth Brute that could expand the design space of elemental heroes. Wild Fusion is a brutish twist on the classic fuse mechanic. In good brute fashion, it adds an element of randomness by not letting you pick which card to reveal. To compensate for this unreliability, the payoffs for successfully wild fusing are bigger than they would be for normal fusion. Bury is an earth mechanic that plays into the element's love of arsenal. When you bury a card, you place it under any card in your arsenal, or directly into your arsenal if it's empty. A buried card is not considered in your arsenal and can't be played or destroyed by cards like C and C. When a card leaves your arsenal, the topmost card buried under it enters your arsenal in its place. You can thus stack up cards in your arsenal, but only play them in the order you put them there. I believe these two mechanics form a natural evolution of the mechanics presented in Tales of Aria, and really show how much more design space there is to create new and interesting elemental heroes while staying true to what the talent and its subtalents is about. To give you an idea of how this card would work, since there is a lot going on here, I can pitch a yellow to play this for 8, and with 1 card in hand, I can reveal it. If it's Earth, I then get the effect to be able to bury it when I discard that card, regardless of if it is 6 power or not. I think Tectonic Romp is a wonderful, wonderful card and really pushed the boundaries for what this talent is doing.
True.
I love how they've been able to blend Fusion, which plays with the cards that are in your hand yet to be played, with the randomness of Brute, that is also selecting cards that you're not playing to do something with them. And I think most of the time, you're probably playing this card with 1 leftover card in hand, which makes it really elegant. Like, you reveal it, and then discard it, and then maybe put it under your arsenal. And there are other options, though, if you have multiple other cards in hand. You can still have a little bit of that variance from Brute coming in.
Yeah, like flavor-wise, this card makes me think of like a tribe of like brutes descending from like druids and harnessing the power of like nature. And I love the fusion of earth and brute in a way that like it really is unique from the other 2 elemental heroes. And this also doesn't say anything to do with like discarding a natural 6. It really denotes the potential of the hero ability and how that interacts with what you discard or what you fuse with. And because there's no like requirement to discard a 6, I don't think what you fuse and then bury will necessarily break how Brute would work in this way. Like, giving Brute extra card mechanics would just give you like the relatively below rate cards like Evergreen or Burgeoning that have to be played from Arsenal. It's like, it just screams like a completely unique playstyle from what we've seen with like KO, Reinhardt, and Levia.
Yeah. If I really think about the best way that this card can be played, and the bury mechanic specifically, it's being able to play a Tome of Harvest and then replace that card in your arsenal while also drawing the cards to be able to play it and maybe another weapon or something else on top of it. Mm-hmm. I also love how the Wild Fusion requires you to run extra Earth cards.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Normally with Fusion and with like the small Earth synergies that we saw in some of the other heroes, you only really needed to run a couple of Earth blues. It didn't need to be a big part of your deck. But with Wild Fusion, it does. Because if you ever get the tempo and want to make sure that you're able to pull this fusion off, you need to have a high density of Earth cards in your deck. Mm-hmm. So it's requiring you to build more into your talent to get this wonderful payoff of like having a Blasmo arsenal, right? It is a card in Arsenal that isn't technically in your arsenal and gets to avoid arsenal disruption. And with the Earth cards, I think that lets you promote a more mid-rangey playstyle that they've always wanted for Brute over the aggressive one that we see in KO and Levia.
Yeah, that coupled with the already existing like damage prevention effects and extra defense you get from Earth, you also get to tap into the explosive power of Earth with Channel Mount Heroic. That's like mono Earth. So you get to use that instead of like Blood Rush Bellows. So maybe this in tandem with a new like Earth weapon pushes you away from like Blood Rush Claws builds. So this design gets me really excited for if this ever comes to fruition.
Not to mention, now we weren't given a rarity for this card, but I would like to imagine it's not color locked. And if at red it's at 8, then at blue it's at 6. But because it's an elemental Brute card, that's not actually disrupting the pool. Mm-hmm. It's not giving Reinhardt and Levia undue consistency.
Right. Such a good specification there.
Now, I believe that this designer also has a slew of other Elemental Brute cards that we haven't looked at for this contest, but if you look for them online, you might be able to find other stuff like it if you're excited about this design.
Yeah, they really did a wonderful job. I felt like this both had a great awareness of the nuances that you need to have when you're designing a card, while also being able to take a really big swing with the berry mechanic.
Right.
And design something powerful and flavorful that still is rooted in something very realistic, something very printable.
Right. I agree. So thank you so much, Michelle, for submitting this card. This is a really fun card to talk about and just gush over like how much flavor this brings to the Earth Town, which I think a lot of people have been feeling the lack of.
Now, I would like to move on to some honorable mentions. Not unlike Fuzzy in Hero Specializations, we had a couple people design some very similar card ideas. I want to talk about two, specifically around the lightning talent. They designed these token afflictions, which I just absolutely loved the design space for. The first one used something called a dampen token. It was designed by Sean Barnes. It was a token that gave +1 to all lightning attacks targeting the hero. So it's an anthem effect, which I really liked because lightning... What I disliked about Lightning and Aria was that you were always putting resources to create value that didn't happen unless you hit the opponent. But because it didn't raw increase your power, it actually made it easier to block and prevent that value. Mm-hmm. With this token, it now gets harder to block those cards, and it's easy for you to get that talent. I like this because it enabled the previous card slew of Lightning.
Plus the flavor of dampening your opponent in order to make it easier for you to shock them with your lightning attacks is pretty cool.
Yeah. The other one was a static token designed by James Bell. This one was an affliction that would stay on the opponent for longer than just one turn. Static tokens also have the ability for the opponent to spend a resource to destroy it. I like this because it's a great way of keeping that extra stacking damage that Lightning is already known for, but it gets to stick around. It's not just on the one turn. You get to maybe put those resources, that fusion, that extra work that you're doing, it gets to stick around. And there's chance for the opponent to interact with it. The opponent can always block you out, but if you ever hit and there's enough of those static tokens lined up, that one damage can be a lot. Maybe through an attack reaction or instant speed pump effect like Lightning Press.
For sure.
Another card I wanted to shout out was Twin Sparklers by Mal Zenith. This was a Draconic Arrow, 1 for 5. If you pay for the attack with a red card, it gives the attack double on hits, which was some nice flavor with the name. He also described it as like little firecrackers on an arrow, which I also like the image of. The idea of a Hawkeye character was pretty fun. I especially like this because when I designed a warrior ranger in our hybrid class episode, I focused on double on hit effects triggering, and this one did double on hit effects triggering.
It feels very ranger.
Yes. Also, like, they have some really nice on hits to double up on. So it was really cool to see this.
One thing I liked about this design, and the designer Mal Zenith mentioned it in his notes, is how if you pitch a red to play it, that's actually a really big hoop to jump through. Because what's the first thing you do as a ranger on your turn? You load your bow. So you've already pitched a card. You have to have no resources floating in order to pitch a red card to play this arrow.
The next honorable mention I want to discuss here is Vile Grip by Equinox. Vile Grip was a 4 for 8 Shadow Guardian attack action card that when it hit, gained a life equal to the amount of blood debt that you have. This was very much centered around the remnant mechanic. Whenever you pitch a card, you can banish it from the graveyard to net 1 resource. So very much this was a card that demonstrated both the powers of the remnant mechanic, right? It costs 4 resources, so you want to just pitch a blue and then activate remnant once to attack with this. then you also see how the on hit is like a way of quote unquote turning off blood debt, but in a way that maybe makes cards like, oh, I don't know, Poison the Well incredibly cool. Nothing like taking double blood debt damage to really put a damper on things.
Mm-hmm.
It was a really cool idea for like Shadow Guardian.
Yeah, this is a really interesting approach and keeps like the same 4 for 8. So like if your hero ability had like a 2-cost ability, I don't know. I think this design was really cool.
Yeah. And I would imagine, I love that you mentioned that the 2-cost giving some type of evasion makes a lot of sense, goes very nicely with this card. But, you know, maybe if you're trying to make best use of that remnant mechanic, maybe that gets a little bit harder. The evasion makes it easier to gain that life too. So it provides some reliability, but if you ever end up stumbling with Guardian, then you could end up taking a lot of blood debt damage and really getting punished for it.
True, based, and factual.
All right. That's all I have for the talent category. Let's go ahead and move on to our blue pitch. Joel?
All right, gamers, we're off to legendary equipment, the last category, but certainly not least. Much like my cohorts, we're going to be starting off with our runner-up. So please give a fat drum roll. Second place, we have Mal Zenith with Sinner's Scars. Woo! Let's go! So Sinner's Scars is a shadow chest equipment with Battle Worn 1. And it says, whenever you lose life from the ability of a flail you control, cards you own lose blood debt until end of turn. And Malzinus left us with this description. This is based off the religious punishment vibe that Vincent has going on, but I wanted it to work with Hexagore as well. Self-flagellation as a flail subtheme seems like a ripe space for the shadow talent to expand into, and this helps enable that. Art-wise, it'd just be a very heavily scarred bleeding back of like some unknown cult figure with some weird glowy tattoos or something. One of the biggest issues with Flail of Agony in Hexagore right now is how you will generally lose additional life from blood debt unless you're attacking with them as a follow-up to attacks that you already have. And this allows you to use them defensively and turn off the drawback that shadow cards inherently have. This is at the cost of running a chest that generates resources and 5 life from Carrying Husk. So it should still remain relatively niche, but it will help enable more fun flail-centric builds. This also allows Levia or Vincent to quote-unquote turn off blood debt by losing life to the weapon. Though Levia doesn't get to do this if she's already put on 6 or more blood debt cards. A bit of self-flagellation and bloodletting isn't enough if you've made too many promises to demons. And yes, they're aware that this chess piece doesn't generate resources. However, chess pieces that represent big chunks of virtual life is a space they've played in with cards like Blazing Yoroi or Carrying Husk. And this is kind of in those same veins. So initially I was like really jazzed about the just including flails in general in cards, because I've mentioned on this podcast before how there's a criminal lack of flail-centric support in cards for Levia and then eventually with Vincent.
Yeah, the fact that both heroes have multiple builds where they don't even use their signature weapon is really disappointing. We like to see these weapons be front and center.
And one thing I wanted to note as well, even though Levia can't use this chess piece to great extent once you hit that critical mass of 6 blood debt, in the end game, when you're approaching the 13 life threshold and you end up transforming into Blasphemant Levia Consumed, you actually get rid of the clause where you mill off the top of your deck based on how much blood debt you have. Because if, let's say you have exactly 5 blood debt after playing a card out of Banished with Blasphemant's effect. If you then swing with Hexagore and take at least 1 damage, none of your blood debt will trigger and you will not mill anything. So initially, Clark and I were like wondering what the best use case scenarios for Levia specifically, and being able to turn off that detrimental effect of milling yourself makes this an end game monster. And we really appreciated that unique interaction between the 2 cards.
I love the flavor of this card. I think flails are a very thematic weapon in Flesh and Blood. Both of the ones that we've seen deal damage to you, and Mal Zenith has recognized that pattern and used it to an exploitative way that's giving you value, enough value that you might even be willing to ditch your other chess pieces that Shadow is able to run, like Tunic or Carrion Husk, to maybe save you more life by stocking up on Blood Debt. Levia is has a pretty powerful hero ability that you can turn off Blood Debt for your turn, and giving that ability to Vincett, I think, can open up some really cool play patterns. Imagine the Vincett taking 1 damage every turn, but stockpiling a huge stack of cards.
Yeah. I also want to point out that this is a great instance of seeing a design and appreciating it for its future design space.
Right.
Yes, when we look at the current one, you're kind of saying it lets there be a little bit more continual Blood Debt, maybe in Vincett. Maybe Levia has these 2 moments where Hexagore becomes very, very powerful, where you can take 1 self-damage and turn off Blood Debt on some very lean turns, try to sit around that 4 and 5 space with Blood Debt. And then again, once you flipped into Blasmafet, the ability to stop the milling so that you can deal with your pitch stack very nicely. That's cool. But really what's most exciting about this is the fact that as they print more and more Shadow heroes, they will probably keep returning to the flail design, and we will always return to this legendary card and be like, can we use this? Is there a way that we can make this good?
Yep.
And that is what is really exciting about this, is the future design space opportunities that it opens up.
So true. So Malzenith, thank you again so much for bringing us this card. We had a lot of fun evaluating it, and hopefully you can start a discussion and see what everyone else thinks about the card. All right, and now the moment you've all been waiting for.
The final first place.
The final first place. So, thank you very much to Ben Fox for your design of Cloak of Concealment. Let's go! So Cloak of Concealment is an assassin equipment chest piece with Temper 2. And the ability reads, as an attack reaction, you may destroy a silver you control. If you do, target attack action gains stealth until end of turn. Ben Fox left us with this description. The thought behind this card is to increase the number of stealth attacks for assassin heroes like Azuri. This design also gives an alternate use for your silver tokens. You could, as a reaction, give a card like Hurl the stealth keyword so that you can then activate Azuri's ability or synergize with cards that care about stealth, like Spike with Bloodrot. This card would allow generic cards to gain stealth and open up card pool options.
And open up card pool options, it does indeed. Wow.
I love the flexibility of this card.
Yeah.
I mean, just every single assassin can think about what they can use this card for. It really is so special.
Because when I think of assassin, they would probably take every opportunity to be stealthy and use their surroundings and every tool they have available to themselves to get the job done. And this card really exemplifies that. And giving cards with natural go again, like Ravenous Rabble, I've seen in the Redline Azuri list, being able to give that stealth to then swap out with another card and saving your Ravenous Rabble for the second cycle seems really strong. And I don't think Azuri is the only one that can use this chess piece to great effect.
Yeah, the new assassin that we're seeing in Part the Mistveil.
You mean Nuh?
Yeah.
No, nude. Like nude. It's a play on.
I'm pretty sure it's Nuh.
Yeah, it's got 2 U's for a reason. It's it's Nuh. Anyways, you're saying, Fuzzy?
To be able to suddenly say, hey, these blue cards you're blocking with, those are actually going to go to Banish Zone, not Graveyard. Even Arachne Solitary Confinement, being able to use an attack reaction and a silver to give your cards go again, to come into another chain link, that just has a lot of explosive potential.
Snatch with go again?
Hey, yo.
But you have to spend a silver, so you're threatening it with something on board. It's not quite a crazy surprise, because it's hard to get silver out of nowhere, and you can only do it when you have the silver. Silver is a precious resource for assassins, and giving it up to give go again is probably a little bit less value than buybacking an equipment to block for one.
Gentlemen. I understand go again, but hear me out. You could also, with this card, play CNC with a blue, give it stealth by sacrificing a silver, and then playing Spike with Blood Rat on top of CNC.
Man.
Destroying their arsenal and giving a Blood Rat Pox or whatever you want. Like, the way that you're able to play all these Spike cards to great effect, like making everything just that much more devastating. Man, I loved evaluating this card for that reason.
Not to mention, it really seems like stealth and contract are intended to be a part of assassins moving forward,
Right.
in a lot of their design iterations, right? It's not supposed to just be like this is the contract hero and this is the stealth hero, and then we're
Right.
going to come up with a new one. No, it's like stealth and contract are going to be two keywords that we're going to see showing up throughout the design space. And this is one that I feel, this is an equipment that I feel really utilizes both, and it just completely opened up my mind to new ways of building heroes. Again, talking about that, like, I want these cards to make me excited to play the heroes
Right.
and rethink how they're supposed to be.
Right.
This card exemplifies that.
Yeah. Again, very concise design, but so many implications to this card. And that's why it was just, you really hit it out of the park. So thank you so much to Ben Fox for giving us Cloak of Concealment. And before we move on to the Arsenal/Stat Zone, I want to go to my honorable mentions. And the first one that I wanted to start off with was Lachlan, who gave us Special Pebble. Now, this one landed in the honorable mentions because unfortunately it was not a legendary equipment, so I didn't feel it was right to give it a winner spot. But this is probably one of, if not my favorite card that was presented for this contest. So Special Pebble is a fabled gem for Brute. It's a Brute resource with no block. And it says, when you pitch this, Intimidate. If this would be discarded from your hand, it counts as a card with 6 power. And another reason why I like this card is because Lachlan, in their description, mentioned how powerful a gem that could be like discarded to any 6 power or pitched to Intimidate. They understood that this was going to be a powerful effect, so they could not let it block, similar to like the rest of the gems. So thank you so much, Lachlan, for giving Special Pebble. I really enjoyed the design, and I love how you can add this to pretty much every Brute, and they won't really care. Now, there's some...
Another non-blocking Leviathan.
Well, not only that, but I think playable gems are a big point of contention in Flesh and Blood, but I think this card was just too good not to include.
It has a lot of character.
Yeah,
it
really
has.
does.
I mean, Special Pebble. It has a lot of character.
Yeah, like it's so Brute coded. I love it so much. So thank you so much again. And lastly, I wanted to talk about Peter's design with Momentum Greaves. Now, Momentum Greaves is a legendary leg piece for Warrior that has 1 block with Battle Worn. Basically, Peter designed this interesting fusion of Grains of Bloodspill and Valiant Dynamo, where if you hit with an attack with Go Again, you can bank that Go Again in an agility token similar to Grains of Bloodspill for the next turn. And in that way, you can also present an on-hit to remove the Battle Worn counters from like Valiant Dynamo. So this is like an interesting like yin and yang version of Valiant Dynamo and Grains of Bloodspill.
We talked for a long time about this card, and I really love some of the ideas it was presenting. And it really embodied Warrior in my mind too, being able to take your excess from another turn, convert it for your next turn, and play really efficiently over a long game plan. Like, it very much embodied that aspect of Warrior for me.
Yeah. I also like how it presented a space that could usurp Valiant Dynamos in the swing design of Warrior.
Right.
So in this instance, like, there are very clear and obvious power turns, but this would make you rethink how much Go Again you actually end up putting in your deck. For example, I think Blade Runner gets a lot worse with this card, because if you're making so many agility tokens with these on hits, then you don't really want to play Blade Runner on your very first attack. You want to play it on your second attack. But then you're not really using the Go Again or the extra power that Blade Runner gives you, but then you can turn it into the agility for the next turn. There's a lot of back and forth that you can do that would actually really change how you end up designing the deck and what cards you choose to include or not.
And something I was thinking about too is like this actually really enables the ability of Go Again with cards like Decimated Great Axe or even Dawnblade. Mm-hmm. Like, if you're able to give Go Again, but you can't get a second swing out of it, that's okay. Just bank the agility token for later and set up a larger, like, 2-swing attack, which I thought was interesting because it's moving away from Dynamo, but still giving you the recurable value of Dynamo.
And it's not still just explicitly better than Dynamo, because Dynamo, you get it anytime you swing twice. Well, with this one, you got to do this roundabout thing and making sure that you can land it on hit. And if you're using it to block every turn and using it to bank an agility every turn, that means you need both weapon attacks to hit. And that's a lot harder to pull off. So it's not as reliable in the continual block value as Valiant Dynamo, but it trades that off by providing some easier access to go again and a more powerful option in the legs piece.
Right. So thank you so much to both Lachlan and Peter for your designs. We really appreciated all the thought that you put into those. And hopefully, maybe in a future contest, we see some of your other designs. But with that, I think my pitch is done. Let's go to our Arsenal Zone.
So for those of you who don't know or don't remember from our turn 0, the Arsenal Zone is typically where we take a moment to talk about some of our favorite cards, or maybe a card that we hate, or a card that we don't feel too much about. But because we've spent so much time talking about cards, we thought we'd mix it up a little bit and refurnish it the Stats Zone. Cue 80s graphics and neon. Choo, 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 choo.
I think you're editing that.
Oh, no.
So we're just going to talk a little bit of numbers about our contest. Starting off with my category, the Hero Specialization category. There were about, and I want to give credit to Clark here, who actually counted all this up for me. There were 16 different heroes represented across all the different submissions. Like 16 different heroes got a custom specialization in this contest.
Yeah, not including Typanis, and someone presented a design for a homebrewed hero.
So more like 18.
Yes, but out of the 25 playable CC heroes, we got 16 of them. That's over half of the roster represented.
For 46 different submissions, like, it was a pretty wide range. Now, viewers, do you think you'd be able to guess what was the most popular hero to receive custom specializations?
If you're on our Discord, you definitely can.
Wait, for the people that are audio only, let's give them like a second to think.
Do, 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 do. We're not gonna
It's
do the whole
Riptide. There were 10 different Riptide submissions,
God dang.
which is double second place, there was 5 Arachne submissions. So you guys really like your low tier heroes, and that makes sense because those are the heroes that you want to see like get a new, refreshing playstyle and boost to their kit. Lots of Riptide traps. Not all of the Riptide submissions were traps. There was one that I really liked that like triggered based on what your opponent pitches and destroys cards in their pitch zone. But all in all, like I'm super happy to see all of this support for your heroes that you love, and thank you to everyone who submitted.
For the talent category, we had a pretty good spread. 4 Draconic, 2 Earth. We had 2 homebrewed submissions and Ice. Second place tied with Light and Lightning, which are very different, but are pretty close together. We did have a Mystic submission. Shout out Teklo Foundry, who designed a Mist Veil sword that was a 0 for 7, but you could only activate it if you've transcended that turn, which was a really cool little design. I really appreciated seeing that. Thank you so much for submitting your design. But taking the cake up at the top, 11 shadow cards.
Golly.
And that was out of 33 submissions. 11 of them were shadow, so that's 1/3.
1/3 of the submissions were shadow cards. I tried to fight the allegations, guys. I also want to point out that 18 of our submissions had a class associated with them. People were tying a lot of the card designs to a class.
So like 15 of them were talented, but like quote unquote generic, like
yes,
just lightning, just earth.
Yeah, just lightning, just light, just earth. I really enjoyed a lot of the submissions that I got to read through. I found it very exciting to see a lot of the designs. Like, I really hope that if you are listening to this episode, you jump into our Discord, you share it, you talk about it. We have a pretty good community in there. no one's overly negative. We all try to build each other up and talk constructively. So please join in, share your submissions. We'd love to see conversation about it outside of just the three of us like doing our late night talks.
Cool. Well, I'll go next. So for legendary equipment, it was pretty like spread out across the board, but there were some notable like spikes and submissions. So out of 35, there were 6 warrior cards, 6 assassin cards, and 6 ranger cards.
Ooh.
And the warrior was cracking me up a little bit because like warrior surely needs another legendary piece somewhere. I think they have like, or at least Bolton has a one for every slot. But that was just making me laugh a little bit. And I think the most interesting was that inversely to like the talents, there's only one shadow submission.
It did make it to runner up.
It did make it to runner up. That's true. It was a really cool design. And there was one, both merchant and shapeshifter. Those are both really fucking cool too.
Yeah. Really interesting to see those show up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's a lot of really interesting ones. I think legendary equipment is something that everyone can kind of like relate to because it's such a staple for not only heroes but classes in general. And seeing everyone's takes on how to like make classes better in general and offer different playstyles was a lot of fun for me to look at.
This whole contest was a blast. I had so much fun doing this, and I can't wait for us to do it again. Okay, maybe I can wait a little bit because it was also a little bit exhausting.
Yeah,
A lot of money.
But it was like so cool.
yeah.
It really was. You know, I really want to point out here that when I look across our statistics and I look at all the different categories and all the different ideas that were brought forward, I think the people who engaged in this contest really wanted to see some of those unsung heroes of Flesh and Blood get interesting and fresh cards represented here.
That's one thing I like about custom cards, you know? Like, everyone's giving their ideas for, like, how could we round off the corners of the unplayed heroes or fill in those holes that they see in the game, you know?
Yeah, lots of, like, Betsy and Olympia specializations, lots of warrior ideas, all things to sort of look at these heroes who feel like they need something and the community rushing in to say, I have an idea, I have an idea. I think that's really, really cool. And it's both a marker for the community wanting to be a part of building this game and also the hype and the excitement of seeing what LSS will come out with. So I'm really looking forward to Part the Misfail and seeing maybe if any of these designs maybe get echoed or
100%.
yeah. No, of course, all the designs coming out in Part the Misfail have already been designed, but it's definitely interesting to see if maybe any of us were being prophets here.
So whether or not you've submitted a design, we'd love to hear your thoughts on our Discord. What was some of your favorites that we saw? Maybe if you have any favorites that somebody else posted, you can shout them out and start some discussions.
Yeah. In the comments, on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, other Discords. I don't know, man. Put those good vibes out there.
Hell yeah. With that, I think we're going to sign off.
Until next time, guys. Bye.
Thank you so much for listening.
See you next week.
Pitch It To Me podcast is hosted by Fuzzy Delp, Clark Moore, and Joel Recinos. Our executive producer is Talon Stradley. Music by Dillon Hulse. Logo by Han V. And sound mixing by Christopher Moore. Last but not least, we'd like to thank you, the listener. Thank you for tuning in. Please give us a follow on your favorite social media platform at Pitch It To Me Podcast. They're trying to keep me down.
They're active right now.
Yeah, 11:20 p.m. Don't you know that's the best time to come into Long Beach?
I know.
I guess.
Plane
Long Beach at
population.
11:20. Let's fucking go.
Plane population is just so active. We need to like get some natural predators and just kind of introduce them to the
Just
environment.
fucking dragons. Just.
Natural predators is crazy.
No, sorry, we already have a natural predator for planes. Boeing's board of executives.
God damn. That was such a
Yeah, made
S
you
tier.
laugh there, bitch.
S tier joke.
Well, I'm a level 0 judge. I think I know what I'm talking about.
Can somebody else start?
I'm Joel.
I'm Clark.
And I'm Fuzzy.
And we're the hosts for Pitch It To Me podcast.